Moms for Liberty really worked miracles.
We have a crisis in America in public education. This is the future of our kids and our country.
You are joyful warriors.
And we are just getting started.
Welcome to the Fire of Liberty show. I'm Tina Deskovich, the CEO and co-founder of Moms for Liberty. In this show, we bring you frontline warriors from across the country. And I often say we're fighting in this culture war, and that many of these parents that are on this show have been forced into this culture war. They don't want it. This is not what they want to do with their free time and their spare time. And our guest today is no different. But first, I want to mention something that happened yesterday in South Carolina in their House of Representatives. There was a woman, a state rep on the House floor yesterday that said Moms for Liberty is a terrorist organization. Happens to be yesterday was the 6-month anniversary of Charlie Kirk's assassination and murder for political ideologies. The more and more we learn about it. And so that we know that rhetoric is dangerous. Moms for Liberty members are joyful warriors. You heard President Trump in the opening. We work hard to fight for parental rights, to protect children in schools, to stand up for what we believe in and our values. And we do that in a joyful way. Are we sometimes a little angry about things? Sure. But we never once have resulted to violence or anything of that nature. And for an elected official in the state of South Carolina to stand on the floor yesterday and call us terrorists when there's actual terrorists right now in New York City throwing bombs, trying to murder people is unacceptable. And so I ask that you go out to our social media. I think the posts are already up this morning. Call out this woman, call for her colleagues to censure her, call for her colleagues to ask her to retract what she stated and make her apologize for what she's done before there's more violence in this country over political rhetoric. And it's just unacceptable. Sorry for that tirade. Now I'm going to get to our guest today. He also is a frontline warrior. You may not think so because he's actually the chair of the Florida State Board of Education, which is a pretty big title. He is an important man doing a lot of great work. But to me, he is a frontline warrior. He serves on the Moms for Liberty Advisory Council. I've known him now for a number of years, maybe 8 to 10 years. And his story is compelling. But beyond that, he brings so much hope because he has turned tragedy and the things that have happened to him and his family into his mission, I would say. We'll see if he thinks that's his mission, but it seems to be his life work now. And he is impacting schools across the country in a positive way. And so we really want to dig into that today. So I want to welcome to the show today, Ryan Petty.
Tina, thank you. It's great to see you. It's great to be in the same room with you. I know a lot of times we have to talk on the phone or just text or whatever. Yeah. So just a chance to sit with you is a treat for me. A
lot of texting. I feel like that's a lot of relationships these days. And Zoom meetings. We've done a number of those, of course. Mm-hmm. And so you're in our great Fire of Liberty studio. Yes, everybody always says it seems so much smaller than it looks on the screens, but I guess that's kind of normal.
It's great to be here. I appreciate the invitation.
We are so honored to have you. So I want to start off talking about why. Why are you have you always been a frontline warrior? Mm-hmm. Have you always been involved in policy drafting and crafting and fighting on this front line in America right now?
No, I've always been interested in politics. I think that started because of my father, just sort of the dinner table conversations that we would have as a family. Remember back when we all sat around a dinner table and had conversations? We still
do it. Well, I don't know that we always talk. It's like, please put your phone away. Please put your phone away and ask a question. You get a grunt from the teenager, but we try.
It's hard, right? We're all so busy, it seems like, and there's so many things scheduled every evening. It's hard to get together as a family. That was almost sacred time, I think, in previous generations. It's something that we tried to do with our kids. It was difficult to do with work schedules and everything that sort of modern society thrusts on us. And of course, with mobile phones and everything else, it's, almost gone out the window. It's unfortunate because that's where I learned a lot about the world and got my interest in, let's call it politics and policy. That was not something that I focused on. I'm a technology guy. I work on software and hardware products in various industries.
That sounds boring.
It could be quite exciting.
Okay,
I think so.
if you say so.
I get excited about it, and that's really been the focus. So there were a number of years where I really wasn't involved in politics or policy. I'd listen to the news, have an interest, obviously would vote, study candidates, understand issues. That was always important to me. Again, that was from my father, helping me understand from an early age how important those things are. But it wasn't until the Parkland tragedy and my daughter's death, and in that unfortunate tragedy, that I decided I needed to get involved. That as a parent, we had missed the warning signs that should have been more obvious to us as parents about what was going on in our kids' schools, and what I have subsequently learned is going on in almost every school around the country. Now, not to scare parents and think that, there's just another Parkland around the corner for every school. That's not the case, but there are things going on in our schools that we should all be troubled by, and things that we can do to improve those schools. And of course, we all got every parent that was paying attention got a front row seat during COVID as to the kinds of things that were going on in our schools. So that has activated me. I was fortunate enough to work with our previous governor and now Senator Rick Scott on the Marjory Stoneman Douglas Public Safety Act.
Let's back up just for a second, because we're in Florida and we lived Parkland. Obviously, you did. I was a school board member at the time. I don't even know how to talk about this with you, and I don't even know what to say, but I do think there are people listening that have never heard of Parkland.
Yeah.
And so you say what happened there, and your daughter is passed, and some people don't even know that are listening right now what any of that is. And so if you could just give a general, when we say what happened there, what happened?
Well, February 14th, 2018, a gunman walked into my daughter and my son at their school, Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School, and began indiscriminately shooting at anything he could see. Tina, as you know, he walked in through an open gate, an unlocked door, and met zero resistance. Unfortunately, those that were empowered to protect that day, the school resource officer did not act. He stood outside while 17 were gunned down and killed, and 17 more injured. And really, obviously devastated our family, devastated 16 other families, destroyed countless other lives in the process. We had 2 kids commit suicide after Parkland because of what they had seen and just not being able to deal with it, what they had witnessed that day, and really changed the Parkland community, I think forever. To the point, and you and I have talked about this, but to the point where my wife and I, we chose to move away from there. We just couldn't be reminded every day of what had happened there. It wasn't until later that I understood why it happened and the events that led up to that. As I mentioned, Governor Scott asked me to sit on the Marjory Stoneman Douglas Public Safety Commission. At first, I was a little hesitant to do that because I wondered, is this going to be another one of those commissions that holds a bunch of meetings, makes some proclamations, writes some documents, and nothing ever changes?
When you were asked, were you hesitant just because I think a lot of people would want to turn in and go hide in a hole somewhere and just be with your loved ones and homeschool any kids you have left and move to the country? And so was there any part of you that was like, no, I don't want any part of that? Or were you immediately called to step up and do something and make change?
Yeah, there were a couple of things that happened. One was, the media descended on the community on Parkland, and the narrative that came out early on that was fueled by the media was that this was a problem. This was a gun issue. This was an American sin, right? That we have the Second Amendment, that there are so many firearms in the country, and that this kind of violence is inevitable because we have that Second Amendment right. That didn't sit well with me, number one. Number two, my daughter was, Alaina was an incredibly patriotic young lady. She was in the JROTC. She had just won in her freshman year, Cadet of the Quarter, which is, most freshmen don't get that. And she really came alive being affiliated with that ROTC group because she was on a Raiders team, it was called, and they went around and would compete with other schools in sort of these physical, like basic training kinds of activities. And what she loved about it was not just the physical part of that, but what she loved about it was the camaraderie and the teamwork. And I watch her lift up her teammates. This is hard stuff. It's Florida. It's hot,
Yeah.
and they're out doing things that most of us would rather just sit in the air conditioning, and do. And so she did that, and she really came alive in that regard. And so, to honor her, one of her favorite things to do with Dad was to go to the range and shoot. She loved firearms, and we'd love to go together and shoot. And that was something we had bonded over. So to see the national narrative turn against the Second Amendment, against our rights to self-defense and to protect ourselves, I knew wouldn't sit well with her. And I knew at some point to honor her memory, I needed to stand up and do something. So the opportunity presented itself. We were literally, we were at the funeral home picking out Alaina's casket when the governor called. He had no idea that's what we were doing that day, but he called to express his condolences and to let me know that he intended to do something, that he wasn't going to let this one go, that regardless of the political consequences for him personally, he was going to make sure something happened. And I said, I'd love to help you with that. And he said, can I call you back in a couple of days? And I said, sure. And he did. And he asked me to come up to Tallahassee to speak to the Senate and the House about a bill that he was putting forward, which was the Marjory Stoneman Douglas Public Safety Act. And so I spoke to them from the heart. Again, we didn't know exactly what had happened or why it had happened, but we did know that there were some common sense things that we could do in Florida to protect our schools, and for no other reason than a lack of political will, these things had not been done previously.
Yeah, that bill was that was obviously in February, and so I think we were mid-session or even towards the end of session here in Florida. And I don't know that there's ever been a bill drafted, put together, passed, signed in a shorter window of time. Things moved really quick.
3 weeks from the tragedy to the time the bill was passed.
It felt like a lifetime if you were living through it.
It did.
Here in Brevard, again, I was on the school board, and so we were trying to figure out how we were going to implement the things that were being discussed. But the superintendent at the time, he threw me out basically because I was such a supporter of things that you were championing, the Guardian program and some other things. He basically threw me out to go do public town halls and lead them. And they were like zoos. I mean, it was Moms Demand Action showing up. It was kids throwing ketchup on their bodies, saying I wanted them to die. Like the chaos across our state. When we talked a minute ago, I said I've talked to people across the country who've never heard the word Parkland, and I'm shocked because it was everything around here for those 3 weeks, which felt like 5 years. But you played such a role in getting that across the finish line, and what a difference that has made in Florida schools. So I want to talk about that. Like what did that bill do? It's really only step one, because now you've talked about other things that have implemented since then, and we've gotten better. But what did that bill do that maybe other countries or other school districts right now could learn from?
Yeah. And I know when I step back now 8 years since the tragedy, and I look at kind of what the higher level purpose of that goal was, there's three things that jump out to me, right? There's a detection element to this, a prevention. We called it prevention there, but it's sort of detecting the warning signs and preventing these tragedies from happening. There's a deterrence effect in the bill, and there's a defensive element to the bill. Those are all, I think, indispensable elements in trying to solve the problem of targeted school violence. And they're lessons that we should have learned. Everybody points back to Columbine. School shootings and school attacks happened long before Columbine. There's a long history of these going well back into the 1800s. I didn't know that before, because you would think everything started with Columbine. But although Columbine is an inspiration for a lot of these school attackers, the history is much longer than that. And the fact that we didn't solve this or attempt to solve this as a nation after Columbine, speaks volumes to the lack of political will.
And since Sandy Hook and Parkland, and you still can go to schools in different areas of the country where they weren't, like Florida. I think we take it much more serious because of Parkland. I'm sure Colorado maybe takes it more serious because of Columbine, but there's still like we saw in Texas,
right?
Like there's places all across the country that still don't even lock their doors.
Right.
And so if there's any call for parents right now, I know after Sandy Hook, I was PTO president during the time. I was obsessively, compulsively at the school every day, just walking down the hallway. Because in Florida, your doors open directly to the outside.
They do.
And so I would just walk down the hallway, check every single door, and,
Yep.
and I just politely open it and say, "Hey, your door's unlocked."
Yeah,
right. Because it's such a simple thing.
And that's the beauty of what we did in that bill, right? After there are simple things that you could do. There are some things that require some complex work and some funding and things like that. But let's just go through some of those things. It's like you say, locking the doors, locking classroom doors.
Is that under detect? So I'm hoping we take this conversation in those three areas that
We
you
can
just
go in
mentioned.
order. Yeah.
So detect, deter,
And defend.
Yeah. I might need to put them up on the wall.
Yeah.
So let's just talk about detect. And so there's some things in the Marjory Stoneman Douglas bill that were
That's
detect, but there's things we've learned since then, or you've learned, or we've learned as a country since then. So just under the category of detect, what things fall under there that people can do, whether that be simple things parents can do, schools can do, states should adopt, what falls under there?
There's two big things that I think parents need to understand and fight for at their schools. And I'll get into some detail about this, because a lot of schools will tell you that they're doing these things, but they're not really doing them, or they're not doing them very well.
We know all about that just with reading scores.
Sure, absolutely. It's all part and parcel of the same thing, right?
Yeah.
So number one, we implemented what's called Behavioral Threat Assessment and Management. BTAM is the acronym that the industry uses.
Of course, there's an acronym.
Of course. And there's a whole association of threat assessment professionals I had no idea existed. And they work in K-12, they work in commercial, they work for critical infrastructure. These are professionals that have learned how to do these things called threat assessments. The beauty of why threat assessment is so important and why it works is that we've learned from averted school attacks and those that have unfortunately taken place, is that over 90% of these attackers communicate their plans or their intentions to at least one other person.
How many?
It's 94%, according to the Secret Service. 94%. So over 9 out of 10 of these, we have prior communication about the intent of the attacker. That's shared with 1, 2, 3, or 4 people. The problem is that when those that term is called leakage. That's when the attacker shares plans or intentions, right? It's called leakage. That leakage is often not communicated to somebody that can do something about it. So we've all heard the term see something, say something, do something, right? It's sort of like stop, drop, and roll. The problem is a lot of people see something or hear something. They fail to say something. And of course, even when they do say something, sometimes people that have responsibility to prevent these tragedies don't do anything about that.
And we see this in schools because educators don't they always want to see the best in everyone.
Mhm.
So it was even after Parkland here, it ended up hitting the news like a year later, so I'm able to talk about it. But when I'm on the school board, I
Mhm.
wasn't able to talk about it. But a student threatened to kill her multiple times in writing,
Mhm.
and she went to bed one night after there was a really direct threaten to come and kill her at some point, or shoot up the school. I think shoot up the school and kill her. It was a very clear threat.
Yeah.
She got in bed that night, still not thinking much about it. Oh, I've known Joey since he was 5 or whatever
Right.
whatever her brain was saying. And she just casually mentioned it to her husband. Like, that kid threatened to kill me today. And he sat straight up and got right on the phone.
Yep.
And they went over to the kid's house, and he had written plans. He had stockpile under his bed. She wasn't going to say anything.
Right.
Like, how can we get teachers, educators, parents to take other kids to take this seriously?
Yeah. So it's hard. It's hard to get them to do that because we don't want to assume, we want to assume they're joking, or we want to dismiss the threat. This is just sort of, I think, standard human behavior, right? We don't want to acknowledge the threat. Fortunately, her husband understood the potential for threat and did the right thing, which is to say something.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, law enforcement followed up and did something. And that was important because what you just shared with me was those are what are called pre-attack indicators or behaviors: a plan, weapons acquisition, even communicating to somebody else, like telling the teacher, I'm going to kill you and shoot up the school. That's leakage, right? That's what I was talking about. So what needs to happen in every school in America is there needs to be what's called a threat management team put in place. In Florida, every school and every school has a threat management team, and every district has a district level threat management team. And those are what are called multidisciplinary teams. That means they're comprised of educators, mental health care experts, if there's
Mm-hmm.
one at the school, and law enforcement. And that's been the missing element in so many of our schools. And it doesn't matter if it's a blue state or a red state, it doesn't matter. Law enforcement, there's this belief by educators that law enforcement really doesn't belong in our schools, that they present a threat, let's say, to students and to student welfare, and they'd rather they not be there. And we saw this happen after COVID. There was a big push to get rid of school resource officers
Mm-hmm.
out of schools. And I testified in Alaska. I testified. I helped some parents in Oregon. I helped some parents in Ohio try to prevent this from happening because there were districts that wanted to get rid of school resource
That was
officers.
happening during Marjory Stoneman Douglas. If
Yeah.
Moms Demand Action would have had their way, at least in our district, they were there 1,000 plus school board meeting after school board meeting crying.
Right.
I remember one specific lady saying, like, I can't believe how scared my daughter's going to be walking up to a school and seeing a police officer outside. And I was like, your daughter should feel safe,
Right.
and like that there's help coming and that she's protected. And so what's going on in these homes and around our country that law enforcement officers people are thinking it's not there to protect.
So I think this goes back to that. We want to believe our schools are these sanctuaries where evil people will not try to hurt our kids.
Mm-hmm.
No parent wants to think about that. We certainly didn't. And we missed some warning signs because our kids came home and told us that there were things going on at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School.
What do you think you missed looking back? Hindsight is always so great, isn't it?
I know our oldest daughter and my son talked about gang fights. There were drug turf wars going on and gang fights that were happening at the school. We kept thinking,
isn't it an affluent area?
Parkland, yeah. Well, Parkland the year before was voted the safest city in Florida.
Are you kidding me?
No,
and you had gang fights at your school?
They did. And we dismissed it as parents. And I'm embarrassed or ashamed to say that we didn't really take it seriously.
But hold up. Are you saying there's a correlation, a connection between violent behavior, gang fights, drug deals, things like that happening in schools and school shootings? Is there a connection there?
I think there is, because what's happened is that we have gotten away from, and this goes to the behavioral threat assessment and management piece. We've gotten away from having consequences for behavior in our schools. So educators want to minimize the actions of a student or to blame environment or upbringing or socioeconomic status or race or whatever it is.
We want to have the toxic empathy, I think. Like we want to feel really bad for
Correct.
For the situation. Does this tie into the PBIS, like the positive behavior is, that's what's in schools right now. The program is hang the carrot, no matter how bad they are.
Right.
No punishment, just keep hanging the carrot.
Well, and restorative justice programs, both of those are part and parcel to this problem of sort of denying that consequences actually can be helpful to a student that's headed down the wrong path. Now, that doesn't mean we take the most punitive action first. It means the consequence should be aligned with whatever the action or infraction was. But too often in our schools, what happens is there are actual crimes being committed. These gang battles and drug activity on our school campuses, those are crimes. And so often educators hide that from both parents, which I think is immoral beyond belief, and they hide it from law enforcement, or they actively subvert the role of law enforcement at the school.
Why do you think that is?
Because there's this mistaken notion, it comes from the left, that introducing consequences to students leads them down a pathway which ultimately makes them antisocial in society, and ultimately they're going to end up in prison. It's called the school to prison pipeline, right?
So you think it's not you think, you're saying that they say that the school to prison pipeline is not because they can't read or anything of that nature. It is because they've been given consequences,
right,
to their actions.
Yeah, it's because society hasn't recognized
sense,
their disadvantage for whatever that disadvantage is, and it's and so consequences lead them down the wrong pathway. So if they interact with law enforcement, they're going to.
So in their defense, though, because I always like to do this, my husband really hates this about me, that I'm like, but maybe they didn't really mean to do it. In their defense, they're probably saying, like, we don't want to label kids early, right? A troublemaker. Yep. I can see that. So there's got to be a way of delivering consequences without putting them in the bucket of bad kid,
right? So
that they end up
right. Look, there's a series of supports that can be put around these kids that are in that, but I think. Let me just step back and say the real school to prison pipeline, in my view, is when juveniles don't understand their consequences for their behaviors or their actions, right? Yeah. Then we've trained juveniles that when they turn 18, there are no consequences. And so when they turn 18 and they break the law and they find out there are consequences, we've actually created that school to prison pipeline that they pretend they're trying to avoid or trying to prevent from happening. So you have to look at the totality of the circumstances. And that's why these multidisciplinary threat teams are so important, because they look at the whole picture for that child. It's not just law enforcement sitting there. It is a teacher that knows them best. And in Florida, one of the improvements we've made is we bring a teacher that actually knows that student. So they can say things like, yeah, Johnny's grades have slipped this last quarter. There's something else going on. Or he mentioned this to me. This is going on at home. Or I'm seeing bullying going on in the classroom, which might factor into this. So they can look at that child holistically. And then, of course, they do the threat assessment. One of the things most people don't know about the Parkland killer was there was an open threat assessment being done on him when he was a student in 2016. It wasn't completed because the school administrator hadn't been trained on how to use the software program to complete the threat assessment. So it was left open and undone.
I'm surprised you all even had one. I could be wrong. Maybe I just wasn't familiar with it before Parkland, but I don't think we did that, especially in elementary schools. I don't think that was a thing. Maybe I'm wrong. But afterwards, it was absolutely a thing. And So how do you think parents can find out if their school has a threat assessment process or a team? Do they have a right to know who's on that team? Like any thoughts or suggestions there?
Absolutely. I would go to your school board members probably first and say, hey, look, I want to understand the threat assessment or threat management process at the district level and at the school level. And I'd like to understand who comprises the team. Now, obviously, school board members are going to get a little bit concerned or probably aren't going to want to share specific security protocols with you as a parent. That's understandable, but they should be able to point you to the school website or to documentation that says, yes, we have a threat management program. Here are the members of that team. Here's our process when we hear about a threat. How do we handle that threat, and what ultimately do we do with that? And again, they'll throw up all kinds of issues around FERPA, which is the Federal Education Records Privacy Act, and HIPAA, and they'll throw a bunch of acronyms at you as a parent to try to dissuade you from investigating further.
Yeah.
But know that you're not, I'm not asking about any individual person. I just want to understand the process.
On the threat team, like I don't need to know that it's Officer Joe and Mrs. because at least here in Florida, or when I was on the school board, the threat team was different depending on the student. Like you need the student's teacher, you now have a different teacher that's on obviously from another student. And so I think just the titles, like there'll be one law enforcement, one teacher, one this, one that, I think is important.
To me, the most important part of that is law enforcement should be a part of that team. And for parents that ask and they find out that the SRO or even an external law enforcement officer is not part of that threat management team, that's a red flag to me.
What should they do?
They should demand that law enforcement be included in that threat management team.
Yeah. And so I'd say start with that school board member. And if you don't get anywhere, you write yourself a speech. You can reach out to us. We're happy to help you compile a 3-minute or whatever your school board allows. And you get some parents together and you get up there and you do not let it go.
You need to be a part of that, because otherwise criminal activity that's happening in the school will be simply dumbed down to disciplinary issues and handled by school administrators that may not understand and likely don't have a full picture of that student's life. Again, I'll point back to the Parkland killer. He was violent at home and he was violent at school. The school didn't know that he was violent at home. He had attacked,
Mother, right?
He'd attacked his mother. He'd attacked neighbors. He had attacked their animals. Law enforcement knew that. The school didn't know that. So that's why it's so important for those two groups to get together, because you've got to get that holistic picture of what's going on in that student's life.
Are threat assessments used for other things besides a potential school shooter?
100%.
What types of things are they used for?
Absolutely. Any threat to that school. And it could be gang violence, could be drug activity, it could be bullying, just simple things like bullying. For parents that are concerned about their kids at school that are being bullied, a threat assessment can be done, not against their student, obviously, but against the kids that are bullying them. And the idea behind this process is that there's accountability. Multiple people are part of this. So it's impossible, I won't say impossible, more difficult to sweep things under the rug and things to not be done. And every principal, it's their responsibility, in my view, to ensure that threat process is being done, that's being managed, whether they're part of that team or not. Look, in a big school, a principal's got a lot going on. They're probably not on the threat management team, but they should be aware of what's going on, and they should be made aware of any threats that are present to that school. And we need to have that kind of accountability in our school systems.
So threat assessments, that's under Detect. Is there anything else under Detect that you would want to emphasize?
Yeah, I think the other thing that is really important is when that threat is there, if you have law enforcement involved, then likely the do something part of that will happen. But that's the really important thing. Lessons, again, out of Parkland and a number of other school attacks is that law enforcement was aware. In the case of Parkland, FBI had 2 tips that they thought local law enforcement was aware, so they didn't forward the information on. That's heartbreaking, because I'd like to think that if local law enforcement was aware that the killer was escalating now and saying he was going to attack a school, that they would have taken those home visits more seriously. Yes, he had been violent at home, but now he's escalating, and they could have looked for a plan. They could have looked for the weapon, because he had acquired a weapon at that point. And of course, if they had gotten to him in October before the attack, they would have known that his whole world crashed down when his mother passed away. And it's believed that was the trigger for him. Losing his mother was
the only stability he had.
The only stability that he had, and that was the thing that pushed him over to actually initiate the attack.
It's so hard to look back and see all the failures in any of these school shooting situations. And so I think it's amazing that you've taken your life to help rectify this, but I feel like you're just sometimes a little one-man band out there, like trying to improve school safety. So the two parts then under detect is make sure the threat assessment is done, and make sure law enforcement is part of that threat assessment key, and then do something with the information. Don't just make a big piles of threat assessments on your desk.
Yeah, and I think parents will find that many of their local sheriff's offices or local law enforcement will be advocates for them. Law enforcement, by and large, wants to help solve the problem, because they're in the line of fire when these things happen, and they know. And this gets into the deter piece. It's a great segue to this. Tina, one of the things I learned is that the average response time for a school attack is 7 to 10 minutes. The average duration of a school attack is 4 to 6 minutes. What does that mean? That means responding law enforcement is not going to get there in time to stop the attack. So when we talk about deterrence, let's talk about some of the things we can do to deter these attacks from even happening. So number one is, if there's a good prevention mechanism in your school, threat management, that's a great way to deter, because the students will know. They hear through the grapevine. They know that there's threat management things going on. They know the adults are paying attention, and that becomes a deterrent. But let's talk about some of the other things that you mentioned them earlier. Locking the doors. One of the things that we learned in Parkland, we've learned, Uvalde was a good example of this. Keeping the attacker out of the school, critical. When you look at the difference between what happened in Parkland and what happened in Uvalde, he got access to a classroom, and he was in there for dozens of minutes before law enforcement made entry and ended that attack. Parkland would have been a completely different tragedy had the attacker gone into one of the classrooms. And unfortunately for other families, he did not make it into that. He did not make it into any of the classrooms. And one of the things that most people don't know about Parkland is, he started, it's a 3-story building. He started on the first level, where he found, classrooms that were unprepared, students that were in the line of fire, and he shot through the little window in the door. That's where almost all of the victims were killed. There were a few in the hallway that were outside the classroom that were killed, but almost everybody else he would shoot at anything he could see. And that's typically what these attackers do. They shoot at anything that they can see. They're not master tacticians. They're not, special forces warriors or anything like that. They just really go in
that
with
best video game, right? Practice.
Video game's probably the best practice they get. That really what they want to do is go in, identify victims, and just kill as many people as they can as quickly as possible. And so what most people don't know about what happened in Parkland is the second floor teachers heard the shots, and they secured their classrooms. Doors were locked, lights were turned off, students were pushed into what are called the safe areas. And those safe areas meant those students were out of sight. He didn't see anyone on the second floor to shoot at, and no one was killed on the second floor. Unfortunately, on the third floor, they heard a fire alarm. The fire alarm went off, and fire alarm generally goes off in these situations because of either dust or the smoke from the weapon. But in this case, it was dust. And those teachers went into evacuation mode. So they got all their kids out of their classrooms and into the hallway. And Tina, the pictures that we saw on the commission, we tried to count. I sat with one of the investigators and we tried to count the number of students in that hallway. There were over 150 students in the hallway when he was on the second floor, making his way to the third floor. By the time the teachers and the students on the third floor recognized what was going on, many of them got back into their classrooms, but not all of them could. And he killed 6 more on the third floor that couldn't make it back into the classrooms. Teachers forgot their keys inside their classrooms and couldn't get their doors back open. It was absolute pandemonium and chaos. And it's a miracle that more students weren't killed on that third floor. So what can we learn from this? Number one, lock the door to the building, lock the door to the classroom. It does put a burden on students and staff to have to open and close doors. I get it, but it's worth it.
It is worth it. And you may disagree with me on this one, but I'm going to throw it out there because I think I there was so many now that I've studied and it's been a number of years, but was there a bathroom that was locked that someone couldn't get into? Because that was a big thing for me. I remember being like, because our principals were locking bathrooms at one point because they wanted to stop the smoking, the vaping in there. And I was like, we don't want our kids vaping, but I recall that someone couldn't get into, because you said out of sight, out of mind, if they could have just gotten into a bathroom or something.
That's right. The third floor bathrooms were locked because of vaping, right? Again, these are other problems that are going on in your kids' schools that you need to be aware of because they have repercussions. They're potential security issues. And this was clearly one. There were kids that were killed in the alcove trying to get to the bathroom, but couldn't get in the door because it was locked.
And people don't know that. No one in my school district knew that.
Right.
And so I had to tell each principal every time I was at a school. I was such a crazy woman after that. I mean, propped open gates in the back for whatever reason, or not just checked and shut, just didn't close all the way.
Right.
Like all of those are what you read about after the fact. Oh, this gate and then that door and then this bathroom, and it leads to death. And so everyone has to be vigilant.
You do. And look, the killer knew the routine at Marjory Stoneman Douglas. He knew that the security officers there would go around and open up the gates just before dismissal so that kids could get out. He knew that those gates wouldn't be staffed. He knew that the exterior doors were open, and he probably knew that most of the classrooms would be open. Now, he didn't choose to go in the classrooms, I think because he saw enough targets, through the glass, because they didn't get in the safe areas. So important, you need to know who's on your campus. So locking doors and locking gates, that's one thing. The second thing you could do, and we've done this in Florida, is single point of entry. So there's one way on and off a campus. And why is that important? Well, you want to funnel that attacker into, you only want to give them one option to get into that school. And what we do in Florida is we've got kind of a contained area, right? The administrative office or vestibule, however you want to call that. You come in, you present identification. The other important thing is understanding who's coming into the campus, and not just for school attacks, but you want to know who's on the campus. And parents deserve to know that their schools are taking their child's security and safety seriously. So we bring them into an area, we identify who they are and what purpose they have to be there. And I know it's frustrating for some parents to have to go through that process. It feels like you're visiting your child in jail or something.
Yeah, it was awful because we had such an open, beautiful campus, like no gates, no fences, doors propped open for the fresh air in Florida.
Right.
And everything changed after Sandy Hook. Everything changed. And then after Parkland, literally bulletproof glass. And it just, didn't feel that great.
No, it doesn't. I'll tell you, when we moved to Florida from, we lived in Washington State, where there were no fences around any of the schools. Doors were unlocked. When my wife went to register our kids for school, she came home in tears because she said the schools felt like prisons here. And we wondered, were we dealing with something here in Florida that was very different than what we were dealing with in Washington? And I think really, as I look back, I think Washington was incredibly naive. They've had school attacks in Washington. They did not have the response that we had here. Certainly the recognition that schools are targets, and then taking steps to counteract that. So single point of entry, know who's on the campus, lock the gates, lock the door. That's deter. That prevents some barriers. It slows them down. It gives law enforcement a chance to respond. It lets teachers get kids into a safe area, away and out of the line of fire.
Is a law enforcement car out front a deterrent? I think it is.
I think absolutely.
Yeah, I would think so.
100%. There's no question about it, because, at a minimum, look, these attackers are cowards. That's why they choose unarmed victims. That's why they choose soft targets like schools, because they're cowardly. Any form of resistance, the attack usually stops. We've seen unarmed teachers stop attacks. Now, I'm not suggesting anybody should do that, but we've seen that happen where unarmed teachers have come in and stopped these attacks. Anything you can do to disrupt their plan. If their plan isn't going the way they imagined it, the attack typically stops. And it either ends in them taking their own lives, or in the case of Parkland, he dropped his weapon, took off some of the clothing he had on, and blended in with the students that were exiting the building. So that's deter. Armed presence. This leads me to the armed presence on campus, which we'll get into defend, right? This is the segue between
But they're
those
also,
two.
I think they're a deterrent and a defendant.
They
right?
are. That's why it overlaps. So in Florida, as you know, we have armed presence on every school campus.
Yeah, you hear that around the country. We have armed presence on every single public school, right? Or is it private school now too?
Private schools are doing it too.
Yeah, but it's required by law. They have to have one in every school, and it's expensive, or it was expensive until we found different ways to do things. But it's necessary.
100% necessary. It provides both a deterrent effect and also that defense. Because you remember I said, law enforcement responding 7 to 10 minutes to get there. By the time they get there, get set up, get ready to enter the building, the attack is almost all but over. So let's talk about defending and what we do in Florida. And I think this is really a model for other states. And there's a few other states that have armed presence on campus, but that in Florida means we've got a school resource officer, which is a sworn law enforcement officer that has special training to be in that school. And they do amazing work just beyond sort of
building relationships. Here in my county, several of them have dogs, and they're the big hit of the school. They keep, the dogs can smell drugs, and so there's a lot of purposes to have them there.
It deters gang violence, it deters bullying. They get to know the kids. They get to know who they are, and they get to be they're positive role models for a lot of these kids, particularly the at-risk kids that may be flirting with breaking the law or heading down a wrong path. A lot of times those school resource officers are a positive influence on them. So I think they're wonderful. Are there bad apples? Are there examples? The left likes to point to the bad apples and the bad examples. Those are typically school resource officers that were thrust into the role without proper training, without understanding all the other things that they needed to do. Some places don't take it seriously, Tina, and they just rotate cops in,
put the oldest,
off the street.
fattest, laziest cop sometimes, and throw them in the
They do.
the school thinking, I think that, well, it changed in Florida, obviously, after Parkland, but has it, it seems like it should have changed nationally by now.
It should have. Well, a lot of the school resource officer positions were what are called many times retired on duty.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was sort
historically,
it was thought to be a nice place to spend your last 5 years, right? Nothing's going to happen. It's a school. You're going to deal with some kids. You're going to sit in your office and, do whatever. That model doesn't work. And that model's completely changed in Florida. Our school resource officers are out and active and engaged with the kids and doing a number of wonderful things in addition to providing that deterrent effect and being there in case they need to defend that school. We also now SROs are expensive. You mentioned that, right?
Yeah. And we couldn't do that here in our county. You guys gave us like a 60-day window or something at the state level. And we just didn't have that many law enforcement officers. They were already short, and I'm sure they still are today. It's a hard field to go into. So there was no one to even hire as an SRO to put into a school. So we were in a little bit of a pickle.
Absolutely. And then when you understand how government works, right? These are separate budgets. So who's going to pay for this, right? Is the school district have to pay for it, or does law enforcement pay for it, right?
And it's done differently all over our state. And sometimes we would compare with other school board members who would say, oh, my sheriff's covering the cost completely. And I'd be like, what? We have to pick it up, or we're cost sharing with our sheriff. And so it had to be worked out. And like in my county, there's, I don't know, 10 or 15 municipalities between the cities and some of the schools we needed a city cop, and some of the schools we had to have a sheriff as the SRO. It was not an easy thing to work through.
It was not. And so what we needed was to supplement the SRO with what we call school guardians in Florida. And I know you and I think are the...
There's one more. There's 3 of us in the state.
There's 3 of us now. Okay. There's 3 honorary guardians, right?
I don't know if you're an honorary. I have the certificate that says I am a graduate, and I could actually go get hired right now. I'm not, I haven't kept up with it, but I could, at that time, I could have been hired.
I think they called me an honorary because they knew I didn't have an intention to become one, an actual school guardian, but I went through the program as you did. Phenomenal training by our sheriffs that
explain what that is, because there's a lot of pushback there from, I wouldn't even say people that are Democrats or left. There's just moms that are thinking, no, I want an SRO. I want a law enforcement officer. So let's talk because I love to do this. Let's talk for a little bit about how well trained these guardians are.
Yeah. So a couple things that you and I know personally from going through the 4 weeks of training, right? 144 hours.
No, 172 in my county.
172 in your county. Great. I did 144. Intensive. There's a background check, psychological evaluation you go through. There is all kinds of sort of training on how to deal with situations,
de-escalation training, first aid training. I learned very well how to put on tourniquets. I didn't have any of that. I wasn't a Girl Scout or a Boy Scout. And so you learn how to do it while people are screaming at you. I don't know how yours was, under pressure with gunshots going on in the background. All of you get it all. We got
the whole thing. We went through the simulation room where they shoot simunition at you to try to see how you respond. It's intensive. And as you know, Florida Guardians, one of the big criticisms when the Guardian program was first put forward was that we were arming teachers, number one. And number two, this was going to lead to a whole list of terrible things that were going to happen. Firearms being left on desks in front of students in bathrooms, and kids were going to get access to the weapons. And
one mom called me to a meeting, and it was literally, I went and met her at the local coffee shop because I would meet all my constituents, and she started crying, and I felt bad for her, but she said, all I can picture is Mrs. So-and-so, the cashier in the cafeteria.
Right.
She has arthritis in all of her fingers. She can barely push the buttons. How is she going to shoot a gun? And I was like, can we use our brain? No one's going to give Mrs. So-and-so a gun. Like she's never going to pass the training.
Correct.
And she can't push, the unsubstantiated fear was so frustrating.
Well, and it was being fomented by the left and the gun control groups and Mom's Demand in particular, that we were going to shove a gun in every teacher's face and tell them that they needed to be armed. And that was never the intention of the program. It's voluntary, number one. It requires all of the training that I just went through
on your own time in the summer while you're not working potentially,
correct.
like on your own dime.
Yeah.
I mean, all the things.
Everything. And the thing that they didn't understand or would never tell anybody is that to pass and become a guardian, you have to pass your firearms proficiency at a level higher than law enforcement.
And the training is actually more hours of shooting than any law enforcement, at least in our state.
Yep.
And you had to certify a night shooting.
Right.
You had to it was extremely hard here in Florida, especially out in the heat, 12-hour days.
Yeah.
And I worked extra hours because I needed extra help to be able
Yeah.
to pass some of those
Yep.
things. And they were kind enough to work with me.
Yep.
But I just, if I could say the intensity of that training, towards the end of the training, I really thought I had already passed all of
Yeah.
my qualifications, which some of those are like any law enforcement in the state has to be able to shoot this and this distance and hit the target this many times. I had passed all that. And so now we were kind of in that tail end. And this is when we were doing the live simulations. Like the alarm would go, you'd have to run down the gravel road, enter the school.
Yeah.
You hear the shooting in the back. You've got to go, like you feel it. It
Yep.
feels real. And I fell apart.
Yeah.
And I literally, I had thousands of times over the previous 5 weeks, I had, put the mag in, put the mag in, put the mag in. Like it's auto, you can do it in your sleep. I entered the school with no magazine.
Yeah.
Like, because you just are like, gotta get in there.
Right.
You gotta run towards it. And so that changed my perspective after that, the Nashville school shooting. I'm sure you watched that video.
I did.
I just sobbed when I watched that video because those officers were like, go, go. They didn't cower. They didn't turn around. They didn't pause. They didn't back up. Magazines were in their guns. Like,
Right.
I know how hard that is to keep that frame of mind when you're going into a situation like that, because I fell apart. And if
Yeah.
I didn't have that training
Right.
up to that level, and I thought I was ready, I would have fallen apart. And so I can't speak highly enough about the training.
Yeah, it was absolutely phenomenal. But being able to do all of those things, to your point, Tina, under stress, and the simulations that they run, I know people hear the word simulation and they may think it feels like a video game. No, the training felt very real. And when we were being shot at also, it's hard. You're stressed. Do I have the magazine? Am I ready to go? Can I point, can I aim at and hit the target that I need to hit? Do I know whether or not that's a target I need to hit, or is that a friend?
They did that to us too. Pulled out like a screaming kid running by, and that you think they're the shooter.
Right.
They play all those games with your mind, and it's tough.
I can't say enough about the training. It's absolutely phenomenal. The program. So all of the bad things that the detractors said about that would happen with the Guardian program, none of those things have happened.
And it's been 8 years in Florida.
It's been 8 years. We've had a couple of, as I see these reports at the state level, we've had a couple of, just a small handful of like what are called negligent discharges, never at school. They've been at home, a guardian taking their weapon home and, unloading it and accidentally, so none of the bad things, nobody's been hurt. No gun has gotten into a student's hand. The guardians have absolutely been phenomenal. And I know as I drive by, there's a school very close to where I live, where my grandsons go. And when I see them out there on the playground now, there's usually one or two guardians standing there, and I can see them. And at least in the county where I'm at, they're very visible with their firearm there. And that makes me feel good.
Yeah, me
that
too.
lets me know that there's somebody that's willing to put their life on the line to protect those kids and those students. And that's what guardians do. And that's what SROs do. So that's defending the school. Now, how does that have a deterrent effect? Well, you mentioned the Nashville shooter. One of the things that we learned from her manifesto is that she was looking for targets. One of the activities is target selection. She had gone to the Covenant School previously, but she chose the Covenant School as a target over a couple of shopping malls because she thought she would meet resistance from security at the shopping malls, and she knew at the school,
Not at school.
she wouldn't meet any resistance. So there's the deterrent effect that SROs and guardians have, and I think it just makes sense. And you look back at the history, the 8 years since Parkland, we've not had another Parkland style attack. If we've had anything, it's been just in the planning stages. Somebody heard something, said something, and law enforcement takes it seriously now in Florida, and they've acted. And we've stopped a number of potential attacks that were in the planning or weapons acquisition process, but never got to the point of an actual attack. And so when I look at these three things, when I look at our ability to detect these activities and prevent them, when I look at the deterrent effect that we've put in place by locking school doors, by having single point of entry, by oh boy, I didn't even get into the training that we do, the drills and training now. Our teachers now know what to do in every situation, whether it's a hurricane or some other reason, a fire.
How often are we doing? Because it was a big mess when I left the school board. We were doing drills like between the fire drills that were mandated and the drills were endless. So is that cleaned up now? And
we've cleaned it up significantly. So we just make sure that the drills for active shooters are done in coordination with the fire drills and things like that.
Let's talk about those for a second, because there was a lot of talk back then about the drills traumatizing kids. Thoughts there? Are they changed at all? Like, what is it important to? Is it traumatizing kids?
There were, again, here the quick answer is no. They don't traumatize kids. In fact, if anything, the kids feel empowered because they know what to do. So much of the trauma that went on in Parkland and all these other attacks were kids that were in the line of fire but had no idea what to do, and that is a hard thing to deal with. Counseling, mental health supports after the fact, you live with that for the rest of your life. I almost died. I didn't know what to do. If anything, training helps in that situation because you know what to do. And there's various, I won't get into the various methodologies that people put forward, but just giving somebody information so they know what to do is incredibly important. It saves their lives. And it saves them from years of trauma and emotional distress over being in a situation that they felt helpless. The training that is done now, it should be, and we do this in Florida, and I think most states do this, or a lot of schools do this, at least it's age appropriate. And there were some crazy things going on with like getting kids, simulating gunshots in the school and having active, kids being fired at and things like just traumatizing things.
We weren't doing that in Florida, were we?
We weren't doing that in Florida, but there were videos,
I've seen stuff online
online where law enforcement took it a little bit too far. Look, everything should be age appropriate. I think that nobody says, there isn't a person out there that says, if we do a fire drill, we're going to traumatize these kids and they're going to worry about, burning up in a fire. No, nobody says that, right? But they make these claims about active shooter drills. No, these are empowering. They provide information. They give people the information and training that they need to do the right thing. The most important elements in that, in my mind, are the staff. Now the staff knows what to do. Think back to what happened in Parkland. The teachers on that second floor got their kids, locked their doors, turned their lights off, got the kids into the safe area. Nobody died. I mean, that if that isn't evidence of what we need to do and how we can protect kids in these situations. And again, all of this, whether you're planning for the big event like a Parkland style attack, or you just want an environment in your school where kids feel safe and learning can happen. Teachers feel like they're empowered. this goes, you asked this early on, this goes all the way into how discipline is handled, whether there are consequences to actions at school. And one of the things that, I would hope parents would understand, there are times when, yes, your son Billy did do that thing, and so rather than going down there to just blindly defend Billy, right? Because my son wouldn't do that, or my kid wouldn't do that.
Billy probably did it.
He might have. And I remember, I acted up in school. I won't tell you the exact incident, but I said something to a third grade teacher one time, and she sent me to the principal, and I went to the principal's office. And back then, you got a paddling.
Yeah.
When you did that. And I was okay with all of that, right? I mean, I knew the consequence for what I had done, and I knew that I was going to get paddled. What I didn't expect and what I didn't like was, after the paddling, there was a phone call to my father at work. And he came, and then I got in more trouble at home.
Yeah.
Once and again, my dad was fair. Did you do this? Yes, Dad, I did this. I admitted it. And he said, okay, well, I appreciate you admitting it, but now these are the consequences at home, because that's not appropriate
lost
behavior.
That as a society, we've lost consequences, not just in schools, but I would say unilaterally.
I get in trouble for this, but I think parents in this generation, and I'll lump myself in that. I've probably leaned towards this maybe too much. Also, we try to be our kids' friends or their best friends instead of their parents. And I think we've got to step back and recognize that being their parent is your charge. That is the mission. Hopefully they'll like you. They may not like you while they're teenagers. I know I didn't necessarily like my parents when I was a teenager, but once I turned 25 and I was married, I had a son, and all of a sudden my parents went from what I thought maybe were the dumbest people on the planet to the most wise and enlightened people that I had ever met. And I would call them constantly. What do you do about this? What do you do about that? Dad, how do you think about this? There's something that magically happens when your child grows up and becomes an adult, and that relationship changes into, you're still their parent, right? Still a child, still a parent, but now that friendship can grow as adults. But to do that prematurely, I think we're doing a disservice to our kids.
We need parenting classes out there. So let's just summarize. You had the detect, deter, defend, the 3 D words.
Yep.
Is there anything else under defend? I mean, you trained the teachers, you trained the students, and
you've got SROs and guardians, armed presence on that campus. It's a fallacy to think putting up a gun-free zone sign on a fence outside of school is going to keep evil from entering that school. And so we've got to have an immediate and certain response to anybody that wishes to do harm on that school, whether it's a targeted violence attack like we've been talking about, or it's gang violence, or it's bullying, or whatever else is going on. That you've got to defend against that. Every kid deserves an opportunity to go to school in an environment where they feel safe and they can learn. And every teacher deserves that too.
They really do.
Where they can teach.
And so you are working through your position in the State Board of Ed to make sure this is how Florida is run in all of our schools. Are you working nationally too? I know you have a foundation you started. I know you work with the Secret Service and creating things. Tell us a little about that as we're going to wind down here over the next few minutes.
Look, we've done some wonderful things in Florida. I think Florida is the model that should be adopted by states across the country. And so one of the things that I've done lately, we've worked with the Florida Education Foundation here to create what's called the Florida National Summit on School Safety. We're going to have that at the end of March, beginning of April, first week of April. We invite legislators from Florida, school safety officials from Florida to come, attend and to speak. And we've invited every state, all the school safety directors for each state, for districts, school safety personnel, law enforcement. We invite them to come to Florida. Last year, we had our inaugural event. We had 20 states show up.
That's fabulous.
It was amazing. It was amazing. It was more than I could have. I had tears in my eyes. It was more than I could have imagined when we sat around the table in Tallahassee and sort of talked about, should we do this or not? I appreciate former Commissioner Diaz for getting behind it. He was absolutely wonderful.
He's a good man.
Our current education commissioner, Stasi, we call him for short.
Because no one can really say his last name.
Yeah, Kamutsas. I've got it. He's been a phenomenally strong leader on this. And I talk to him 3-4 times a week about a number of issues, but obviously school safety is at the top of his list. Of course, academics and the other things, but we've got to have that. What we've learned is you've got to have a safe environment for the other things to happen.
When we all see the videos right now and we know what's happening. It's chairs flying, kids acting out. Teachers can't teach in that environment, and students can't learn. So.
And what we're doing, and so we're taking that model to the country. We're inviting them in. We're having discussions. We actually had some guest speakers come in from like Utah and talk about what they're doing there, because there's a state that's also taking it very seriously. Texas has been very involved.
They need to be.
And starting Texas is a whole different animal. I've learned politically to try to get anything done in Texas.
What's the size of like 5 states combined, and some of their counties are bigger than whole states. We just, maneuvering within Moms for Liberty, we've learned Texas is a beast.
Oh, it's been hard from a school choice perspective. It's been hard from a school safety perspective. Texans love their little independent school districts, and they're often the largest employer in the area. They grew up there and went to school there. They've got a football team, and they love those little independent school districts, and they don't believe that they can do much wrong. And of course we saw, what happened, just after Parkland in Santa Fe. And then we saw what happened in Uvalde. And so, the model, I think, is Florida. So we're trying to export that as much as we can. The Florida Department of Education website has some great resources up there, including the stuff we've talked about, Tina, the threat management. We've done what I call in the software industry, open sourced it. Basically, we provide anybody that wants to download the documents and implement what we've done in Florida, please take it, adapt it to.
We'll put a link to
that
state in the show comments or the show description, so people can get to it, because parents are going to be watching this, very interested in what's going on in their school district now. And it's always helpful as a former school board member if you actually bring me some solutions to what you're there to complain about. So here's your solution, school board member. All of our Office of Safe Schools publishes all of our documentation, but that threat model is phenomenal. We worked with the Secret Service to build that. It's working really, really well in Florida, and it'll work anywhere in the country. So if your school district doesn't know what to do, or your state doesn't know what to do, come to that national summit. We'll give you the lowdown on what we're doing here in Florida, and we'll share all the information that we can and that we have to do that. So that's one thing I'm doing. I've been going around the country talking about this: detect, deter, defend. People like bumper sticker slogans. I've learned after for most
8 years.
people, it's easy to remember. Apparently not me, because I've had to struggle over here the whole time.
I get them mixed up all the time too. Sometimes I'm in deter first, and anyway, but the idea there is just 3 simple things that we can do. Really the heart of what we did after Parkland in the state of Florida to make schools safer. And my message to parents is, if you don't feel like your kids are safe in the school, find other options. Find a school choice option. Find a charter school that might take it more seriously. Find a private school, or do homeschooling. Whatever you need to do. One of the big things, Tina, here in Florida, we're all over education choice here. We like all the options, and so we want parents to have choices. And if you as a parent feel like you're not getting at from your public school, then find another option. There are resources available in most states. Some states it's much more difficult, but don't leave your kid in an environment where they're unsafe. And again, it doesn't have to be a Parkland style attack, just where your child feels unsafe because they'll be unable to learn and grow to their potential.
Yeah. So I think we're going to wrap it up there. I think we're going to have you back because there's so much about education that I would love to talk about. But I think this was a really great conversation. And I think if you look at where God has placed you and what opportunities you've taken advantage of, it's really remarkable. Your impact is endless. For school districts and children across the country. And I'm grateful for that. So
thank you.
It's just been an honor to have you here today. And we're going to wrap it up here with one last question, which I don't know if if you don't listen to my show, you don't know what the last question is. So everybody gets the same question and it works for chapter chairs because they've thought about this a ton. You maybe haven't thought about this a ton. The question is, what does it mean to be a joyful warrior?
Oh, I love I knew the question. I was trying to come up with a really great answer.
Because let me just say, if there's anyone that deserves to not be a joyful warrior, it's you. Like you, not just the dark hole, but you could be angry and bitter, but you're not. You are using everything you've been through for good. And so that is the epitome of a joyful warrior. So you tell me how you do that.
Yeah. So this goes back to that nerdy technology stuff. I'm an inquisitive kind of person, just generally. I want to understand why things work the way they do. And if I can change them. And like I told you at the beginning, so much of that was focused on my career and, those kinds of things. This is, I think about my daughter, Alaina, and what she would want me to do. She wouldn't want me to sit at home and let her death be meaningless. She would not want this to be about restricting the freedoms of law-abiding citizens and Americans. This was not a problem of gun control. This was not a gun control issue. This was a failure of government, quite frankly, to recognize the role and primacy of parents and make sure that they were providing an environment that was safe for our kids to learn. So what does that mean to be a joyful warrior? It's despite the insurmountable challenge of trying to, as I sit and look at the map around the country and I see the states that just will probably reject 90% of what we just talked about today because of the reasons we talked about, it's easy to get frustrated. It's easy to give up, but I can't give up because I watched Alaina in those Raider competitions not give up and not allow her teammates to give up. And so we're going to keep going. We're going to keep pushing. We're going to keep inviting states, school superintendents, school boards, whomever will listen to me. I'm going to keep inviting them to do the right thing. I think we're making progress too.
I think you are making progress. And so that wraps up this episode of the Fire of Liberty show. My guest today is Ryan Petty, Parkland dad, state school board chair for Florida, advisory council on Moms for Liberty, a joyful warrior. I will say we're going to get you the cute V-neck joyful warrior tee over there on your way out the door. It was an honor to have him here today with us. I'm Tina Deskovich, the CEO and co-founder of Moms for Liberty. Please join us every week live 10 a.m. on all of our socials. And of course, you can find us on Apple and Spotify at any time.